So let me hear you. Good and loud. All right, Gary. On one. On two. On three. Take me out to the...
The Monday Morning Quarterback on the 11th of June 2018 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We roll along and look at some of these Sunday talk shows. We have Face the Nation, some edited clips, I guess we'll call them, from Face the Nation. We do this under... open content, which we're not obviously trying to infringe on any copyrights from CBS and Face the Nation. That is one avenue here. We're coming at this particular production from several angles. We'll go to the Globe and Mail in Toronto, Canada for the latest on the G7 summit, or the non-summit, I suppose it could be labeled. Normally with these summit-type programs, there are photo ops and photo ops and photo ops and pro forma discussions and a pro forma communique that has been worked out days and weeks basically in advance. What happened at this particular conclave, a communique was worked out, but the final news conference, the Prime Minister there, Mr. Trudeau, blasted DJ Trump and basically told DJ that Canada would not be pushed around with these threats of tariffs. Trump exploded, as he normally does, on his via his Twitter account, and then his various aides, Credlow and Navarra, played into it. Credlow accused the Canadian Prime Minister of double-crossing DJ Trump. And the recriminations go on and on and on. Navarro said that from the Daily, the Globe and Mail, let's see, a special place in hell for criticizing U.S. tariffs. Well, this is the back and forth. There's a new person in town in Toronto, Mr. Ford. That is more of his style of banter. But for most people, it doesn't work out very well, period. The Foreign Minister, Christina Freeland, told reporters in Quebec that Ottawa would not engage in a war of words with the Trump administration. Canada does not conduct its diplomacy through ad hominem attacks. We don't think that it is useful or productive way to do the business. And if you're doing business, you have to look at it in a business-like manner. She said that Ottawa wouldn't be bullied and would hit back with $16 billion of retaliatory tariffs if the U.S. did not rescind the penalties on steel and aluminium, or aluminum, whichever way you want to go. The retaliatory tariffs will go into effect, preferably reciprocal, or preferably measure dollar-to-dollar response on the 1st of July, which is a Canada Day. Yeah, I looked at this. It's kind of funny. I looked at it and said, Canada Dry, but perhaps not inappropriate, she said. Well, we say dollar for dollar now. The Canadian dollar is not actually worth a dollar U.S. equal, but again, that's good enough for how this is going on. But where does this leave the summit? Well, just basically a non-summit. You can look at it as that. And In addition, you had the European players in there. They were all gathered around a table. DJ Trump was sitting there with a basic Napoleon seating arrangement, I suppose, for him with his arms crossed, looking at them as a father would look at his children, looking down upon him. You had the German Chancellor Merkel and the others there just staring at him. And, of course, he was staring back. But what does this do for the G7? Well, it leads the G7. China, Russia, India, most of the world's population was not there. And the Europeans were, in our humble opinion, from the photo, it looked like they were literally at the master's table trying to get some crumbs out of it there because of trade disparities there. And if they get into a trade war, who does it hurt the most? Well, Germany does a lot of trade with the U.S. No doubt that would put a hole in their proverbial pocketbook. Some of the other nations are less, some are more, depending on what they export to the U.S. And if you look at, say, steel imports, the Russian Federation, some others are lower down on the list of importing nations. Canada does a lot of business cross-border. But when you start talking about a tariffs war, just like anything else, it tends to escalate. And we're not talking about unintended consequences. We went from the highly smooth tariffs to now, and we know the history and we know the impact of these, and they are not good in the protectionist class. But all nations have tariffs on goods. Some tariffs are 50% or more to bring in a product into the country. Many countries, it's very hard, I know this from the computer business, to get your hardware into the country because of the tariffs there, etc. And that would, of course, run the price of your stuff up if you were doing that. And for us, it was hardware, not software, because we were open source and there was no cost to it. It was just a matter of getting the proper internet connection so people could download it. But that's beside the point here. You have Canada, and of course, Mexico hasn't been played up in this. And this so-called North American trade, it's not a free trade, but tit for tat. It's a business type of solution. And ultimately there will be it's a business type of issue, I should say, and ultimately there will be a business solution to it. What Mexico has been doing is moving a lot of their assets to their Pacific coast so the ships can come and literally pick it up and they won't have to worry about the cross-border. Canada is a little different. Of course, they're also in the petroleum business, and their pipelines coming through. What will happen with those pipelines if Trump decides to lay a fee upon those? So there are a lot of different things going on there. Trump called Minister Trudeau's statements false at the news conference and said Canada is charging massive tariffs to farmers, workers, and companies. Well, this whole agricultural thing, these tariffs will hurt some of the agricultural producing states. Now, for the automobile part of it, the trade meltdown there threatens $80 billion in Canadian auto exports to the U.S. They would just have to simply send their stuff someplace else. So a lot of this will have ramifications here, hitting back and forth from the French President Emmanuel Macron. International cooperation cannot be dictated by fits of anger and throwaway remarks. Well, it does play to the base. Even Senator John McCain, who's recuperating from brain cancer, got into it. Said the president's behavior towards the G7 allies was wrong. Well, no doubt about that. And the former Canadian Prime Ministers rally around the flag, a Union Jack in their situation. Stephen Harper, conservative, urged Trump to stop picking trade fights with Canada and join forces to push China to open its markets. Canada has a big foot in the Chinese trade situation, and many Chinese from Hong Kong immigrated to Canada when they could immigrate there for a price, I think it was about 50,000 Canadian dollars. So those are some of the things that are happening here. This Harper led the charge to oust the Russian Federation from the G7. It was the G8 at that time. This is a man who kills his political opponents. There is no place around. It has an ally around the table for a man like that. That's, I guess, is what Stephen Harper said. No doubt DJ Trump is known for throwing people under the bus. You can just ask a long litany of White House types that were around there, starting with Stephen Bannon and various other. When they were useful to DJ Trump, they were on the payroll. When they were not useful, they disappeared, including his loyal security type, the former New York police type that was with Trump all the time in the limousine and on the campaign trail. And he last at the White House, but had a big dispute with the Secret Service. And at one point, he was his firearms were taken away if he had them on. I'm not sure about that, if he was carrying a weapon in the White House. But he did carry some information over to, and I forget right now who it was, but he hand-delivered the particular paper, and that was one of his last acts. The last he's been heard of is he's a security consultant in Florida. So he's been officially retired and out of the scheme of things. Oh, and he was also in the Trump former doctor that was found on the bus. Also, when he went over to get Trump's medical records with another big person, as the Dr. Wiseman said. So these are some of the adventures of DJ Trump. But the traveling show is now in Singapore. The leader of the Democratic Republic of Korea, His Excellency Field Marshal arrived there early and was escorted through the city, including the running bodyguards. So he was neatly, as they say, tucked in bed when DJ Trump arrived there 3 or 4 in the morning on Air Force One. They are both in Singapore, and they're getting ready for the big meeting on a Tuesday. And the ironic part of this is that the world will be looking to Singapore. We're not looking to Ottawa. That was, first of all, an economic conference, although the press covered it. Reuters, the BBC, somewhat because of their involvement there. The Prime Minister May was there, but the world wasn't listening at it. We covered it on Numbers Man and invite you to This Week in Economics on many of these same outlets, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, etc., which we're also on. And we're moving to the Medium, where we just simply embed our some of our broadcast there. We'll be in the political part, the software part, and to be, as they say, determined, period there. Well, let's leave Toronto and the Canadian part of this and go to, I didn't exactly leave. And we'll go to Charlie Cook. Before we go to Mr. Cook, let's get out of the way one of our favorite liberal commentators, E.J. Gion. He's writing in the Washington Post on the 10th of June 2018. Of course, we're on the 11th of June 2018 now. Anyway, what LeBron and Steph could teach DJ Trump. I'll change his article a little bit. I suspect I share this with many others over the past 500 days or so. I have to want to ditch politics entirely. Sports have become my shelter from the storm and a field of competition in which performance can be judged with a degree of objectivity, and hot takeovers, blustery hot takeovers on Twitter do not threaten the Republic. true. It is something about my attitude towards DJ Trump that a political obsessive such as me would want to escape the news. And I'll admit it's not heard that voice. I'm okay. Anyway, and sports are by no means airtight, a sanctuary from political discourse. Trump's war on the National Football League protests and the capitulation by the league owners to his campaign intimidation are maddening for many reasons. But one of them is the president's inability to allow a sphere of life to remain independent of his influence. He always needs to divide and insist on being the center of attention, whether he's welcome or not. Well, yeah, no doubt about it. Nor do I forget that professional sports are making money. Owners make co-decisions to move teams from one city to another, breaking the heart of the faithful. Players are serve their own financial interests. I would say they serve the interests of the owners, aware that they negotiate with people who are doing exactly the same. And for all of this, I'm writing to suspend disbelief so that I can enjoy both the nobility of achievement and the simple delight of the fans. As a long-standing resident of the D.C. area, I was elated when the Washington Capitals finally captured the National Hockey League's Stanley Cup last week. Well, we congratulated them. Sports devotees in the city whose pro teams have lost and lost and lost and again deserve a reprieve. That's true. The football team hasn't been very much, nor the basketball team. Area residents who a month earlier didn't know a blue line from a course line suddenly became experts on penalty kills and cross checks. It was beautiful. New fans joined long-timers in devotingly wanting good tidings for a place they cared about, a brand of loyalty we can treasure. And almost as, although I'm always a baseball fan, as we join him in that. I'm not saying this to reassure my colleague George Will, who regards indifference to national pastime as a form of treason. That's baseball. We look at it the same way. And truly fell in love with the National Basketball Association this season, called the NBA. What a leap to see was to immerse myself in the youthful grace of Tyson Tatum, the drive and genius of LeBron James, and the joyful smile excuse me, of Steph Curry. I am down the line a Boston friend, despite my roots with my neighbor from Cape Victoria, so I revered in the overachieving of the very young Celtics team. After injuries sidelined the star of their Kyrie Irving in the first game of the season, Gordon Hayward. No one expected them to go deep into the playoffs, yet they kept winning and taking LeBar and Cleveland to Game 7 Eastern Conference. And that probably contributed to Cleveland just being simply tired. That does happen occasionally down there, down the stretch. Concerning the up-and-coming generation, I hope Mongers is so. I'm a hope monger, So I love that a bunch of guys on the young side of 30-something. Tatum is 20. So forth. Scary Terry Roser is 24. I'm not sure who the hell he is. But being a rebel beyond my 20s, I admit the dependability and leadership of Al Horford, who is a wise elder at 32. Well, 32, yeah. And the Golden State Warriors 4-game sweep of the Cavs. I didn't think that would have been possible. Took on some fears out of the championship series. The Warriors almost otherworldly dominance earned the team a place in history. Well, when you have that type of dominance, the viewership usually goes down too. Anyway, the question of whether LeBron could carry his team all the way made for good drama, and the answer was no. As did the gritty moment for Kevin Love, despite his big mistake in Game 1 at J.R. Smith. Okay, politics are inescapable, and I respect the NBA's progressive attitude towards racial equality and the players' right to speak out against injustice. The NBA owners should give the NFL owners seminars on these matters, and both LeBron and Curry said they wouldn't go to any White House celebration. So DJ Trump will not see them. I guess the national hockey team will show up there. The president might learn something if he had them over, because of the biggest lesson that politics can take away from sports concerning judging people by whether they deliver on what's expected of them, how teams work together across many divides of personality, race, and nationality, and how partisans can passionately loyal without really hating each other. The Sox and the Yankees rivalry, and listen to the Yankees and Mets game tonight. Mets pulled it out, and it wouldn't be lovely if politics could be fun again. Well, a lot of wishful thinking there, and we'll leave it at that. Let me just okay. We'll go to the next slide. We will go now to Charlie Cook. Let's find Mr. Cook here. And here we are. We started this out with an article from The Hill. This is in California. We covered the California primary, so we're back to it again. And it concerns a single payer and some of the attacks there. Republicans are seizing on Democrats' demand for single-payer health system as an attack line in California. Minnie Waters, most people know her, has been around for a long time. GOP incumbent, top Democratic target, told The Hill the district does not support it, she says. Well, part of the problem here, when you talk about Medicare for all, national, a single payer, it depends on how the information is spinned out there. And my advice in Minnie Waters' district to Democrats is get the correct definition out there very, very quickly. She represents one of 7 GOP districts in California that Hillary Clinton won, but not by a lot. Republicans say that Democratic candidates might have done well in crowded primaries running on a Medicare for all when they needed to move to the left. But they say that the position would be a major drag in a general election decided by centrist voters. The anger, of course, of the base against the president is pushing the party aggressively leftward. That's from Michael Steele, a Republican strategist and former aide to John Bonehead Boehner. I wonder where he is. I think he's a lobbyist these days. They're going to leave them with a lot of candidates who aren't a good fit for the districts. That can happen in the 7 Clinton-won districts in California. At least 5 have Democrats on the ballot who support a single payer. Josh Harder, who expects to challenge Representative Denham, that's in the Central Valley. Katie Hall, who is running for Steve Knight's seat in the northern L.A. County. And again, Katie Porter, who's challenging Minnie Waters in Orange County. Mike Levin, who is running to succeed Darrell Issa, that's in San Diego County, where Issa is from. And Ruffenbecker here, Dana Ruffenbecker, that's another Orange County district. He's been around for 15 years. He is in trouble. Period. It's a Republican Wedges campaign on health care. That is an argument that Democrats can win. That is according to Max Ziber, a Democratic strategist in California. It all depends on how it's run with these citizens there if they try, the Republicans portray it as socialistic, that's a big problem. Now, Rob Pryor's a research director at Target Book, I looked at it, which does nonpartisan political analysis in California, noted that the California House District Democrats are seeking to take back from the GOP are all somewhat conservative, and the Senators want a number of these districts. So this is back to this Mimi Waters pondering, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the RNC Porter on the airwaves over single payer. No doubt about that. They will do that. In that type of race, what you have to do is you have to permit the correct spin to be up there. You can't find odds that are up against you, but at the same time, in this type of campaign with many Walters, whether or not you win the race or not, you can make a serious impact on the race by defining the issues, particularly if they have an opportunity to debate her face to face and talk about the and this is where that people see single payer, they see Medicare for all. They don't understand it. You have to present it from an economic standpoint. That if you have a small business or a medium-sized business that's spending $25,000 a year to cover their worker health care, what would happen if you had a single payer or Medicare for all program? That business would save a lot of the $25,000 because you would get a percentage. It would be a FICA deduction, in other words. Now, yes, on the front side, in any of these programs, the cost will be much more than on the back side. But as you get 5 and 10 years out, it will become much more affordable or inexpensive. And what you're having right now with all the baby boomers out there, Medicare itself and by definition Medicaid are being stretched. And there needs to be a serious discussion because healthcare premiums are going up. At $25,000 now will be midway between $30,000 next year. And that is what Ms. Porter needs to talk about and give examples of businesses in that area and what's happening. People are being priced out of the healthcare market, and at the same time, all these exclusions are popping up. The Trump administration would like to move more and more of these managed care providers into Medicare. And thus, you'll have all kinds of hurdles to jump to not only get your doctors in your network, but at the same time, you appeal on top of appeal, medications, etc. And then you'll have things like LA Care there that use Medicaid dollars. All of this has to be factored in. And one more final point on Orange County. That used to be the base for one Ronald Wilson Reagan. Let me just get to these house races. This is from Mr. Cook, his shop, the primary handicapper in America. This is by David Wasserman. On the 8th, Democrats can be happy and relieved by the results of Tuesday's primaries. They appear to have avoided getting locked out of California's top 2 primaries, advancing candidates to the November ballot. They didn't avoid catastrophe by much. And in New Jersey, Democrats' top recruiters comfortably won primaries in 2 key GOP held areas. And this is where we go into the shutout scenario, particularly in Orange County's 39th congressional district. And naval veteran philanthropist Gil Cisneros helped him advance by 5 points. In the 48th, they're boosting a minor GOP candidate, David Gerbar, by 3.5%, may help stop 2 Republicans from advancing. In San Diego's 49th district left open by Darrell Issa. Darrell Issa was almost defeated the last time around. Rocky Chavez helped drive GOP voters to a front-runner Board of Equity Chair Diane Harkey, who came in first place in the all-party primary with 26%, but that ensures a Democrat would advance to November by coming in second, and indeed environmental attorney there, Mike Levin, advanced. Republicans had some bright spots. First and foremost, the attorney, John Cox, who no one's heard of, he used to be in Illinois, was endorsed by D.J. Trump. Republican turnout in the fall could have been depressed, and their successful recall of state senator, successful recall of Democratic State Senator Josh Newman demonstrates the potency in the gas tax issue. Headed for a fall referendum. More Republicans got female candidates they wanted. This Harkey in San Diego, 49th, and someone named Kim Young. That's an open seat in 39. In some districts, they also got Democratic opponents they wanted. For example, this is back to single payer. Katie Porter narrowly advanced in 45, potentially throwing the GOP many waters a lifeline that should have been cut off. Some observers adopted the blue wave crest narrative on Tuesday. Turnout arguing the GOP candidates combined for majority primary voters in 14 GOP-held seats, except the open 49. Now, for example, Steve Knight, he's in 25. Mimi Waters, both currently set at a heavy looking 53% of the all-party primary vote, despite top Democrats' fall targets. It's going to be a lot of hard work involved in those districts there. This take ignores that in most districts up to a third of the vote remains uncounted. Historically, California's late returns and counting ballots have skewed Democrats. In addition, California's June primary typically brings out older, whiter, and more GOP electorate than the much larger November electorate. For example, in 2012, back to Mary Mary Bono, she used to be married to Sonny Bono. Sonny Bono ran into a tree and killed himself. Or was killed, I should say. Anyway, she took 58% of the June primary, but ended up losing in November. She's now a lobbyist. Tuesday's primary also continued the dominant performance of female candidates. So far in 2018, Democratic primaries featuring at least one woman, one man, no incumbent. Women have the top vote getter, 59 of 84 times, that's 70%. Democrats are particularly excited about November's prospect for Katie Hill. She's in California, 25, and Mickey Sherrill, that's in Jersey, 11. Both prevailed on Tuesday. Meanwhile, GOP primaries feature at least one woman, and then they gave Kim Young and Harkley. And challenges here, Vidaldo, that's California 21, leans the Republican. The likely Republican open seat is a toss-up. That's Darrell Issa. California 49, California 50, Hunter. Likely Republican to solid Republican. And in Jersey, too, that's an open seat. Labino leans Democrat to a likely Democrat. Another open seat, Freelinghauser, a toss-up to lean Democrat. That's New Jersey, 11. Updates. Jeff Durham, that's the Central Valley, Modesto Tracy, a toss-up. Support for immigration reform has allowed him to continue winning re-election in his modest district. Diverse Modesto seat won by Hillary Clinton by just 3 points. With round the vote still outstanding, Denham advanced with 37% of the vote. Democratic venture capitalist Josh Hardin is second with 15.7. Halsey with 14.4, and 5 of Democrats combined for 32%. Hardin's 850 vote lead is probably doable enough to prevent Halsey from squeaking into second place. If Hardin does advance, the GOP optimistic bet Denham can paint him is out of touch. Hardin grew up in Tulloch, but years he spent in elite San Francisco financial circles could be a liability, but it shouldn't be a problem for Hardin. He's raised $1.4 million. David Baldello is in the Central Valley, that's Hartford, parts of Bakersfield, like a Republican that we really need to say anymore. Hillary Clinton won the district, thrived in he's a Latino district. Hillary Clinton won in 55 to 39. Democrats energy business type T.J. Cox, 63% of the vote there. Cox has 442,000 on hand. So they favor him. Anyway, Steve Knight, he's in northern L.A. County, Santa Clara, and Palmdale, both places you don't want to be. The anti-homeless nonprofit executive, that's Katie Hill, advanced to the general election to edge out Brian Cofferino, 20% to 18%. Narrow thing, that's taking on the Steve Knight type character here. Hill grew up in the district and owns guns and horses. Okay. He is open. Royce here. This is northern Orange County, Fullerton, Yorba Linda. Is a toss-up. Oh, and that's Knight's a toss-up. So we got a lot of toss-up districts here. Many Waters, they favor her, won't spend any time there. A toss-up here with Rupenbacher. He's always in toss-up territory there. Most Democratic strategists are desperate for Router to prevail to avoid the awkwardness of DNC having to mend fences. Anyway, Duncan Hunter, that's in San Diego, and solid Republican there. The Democrats don't have a chance. Likely a Democratic seat here. South Cape, May, and Atlantic. Oh, that's in Jersey. More Jersey. We went over the Jersey votes, so we won't go through those again. And let's see, what else do we have here? We have Mr. Cook. I won't read all of Mr. Cook. The cover of the 21st of April, The Economist asked what's become of the Republican Party. Inside the article with headline, How the Elephant Got Its Trump, beginning with a quote from a speech by Jeff Flake. Made in March, never has a party abandoned, fielded its principles, and deeply held beliefs so quickly as my party did in the face of nativist juggernaut. We have become strangers to ourselves. Had the Economist waited a month, it could have added a quote from the former House Speaker Boehner, who told the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce renowned annual Mechanic Policy Conference last week, there's no Republican Party, there's a Trump Party. Republican Party is kind of taking a nap somewhere. Well, that to be true, not to be true, you have to remember that the Republican Party has been adventurous with the right, starting with the Southern strategy on a Tricky Dick Nixon, and it succeeded for Tricky Dick before Tricky was forced out of office. That was in 68 to 72, so he worked for them. And then the return of the Orange County man, Ronald Wilson Reagan, who had been the governor of California, the oldest president at that time to be elected. And he was able to stick around for 8 years and another 4 years for his Vice President George H.W. Bush. So in other words, this is not unusual. we have is here. He points out the Tea Party movement and even the Gingrich Revolution in 1994. That was a reaction to Bill Clinton. The former Representative Tom Davis, who chaired the National Republican Congressional Committee for 4 years, and she was one of the most politically astute people in Washington. The Republican Party base has migrated from the country club to just the country. There's no doubt about that. The Republicans have been in the country for a very, very long time. They have used the country vote, in particular in rural states, North, South Dakota, Wyoming, to get the electoral votes out of those states. And in other states, Michigan, the rural vote was strong enough and would couple with voter suppression and voter apathy to win in Michigan. Gateway Snyder proved that and turned Michigan into a right-to-work state. And disgruntled Europeans in the working class that fell for his hard line. And we had a survey, I think last week we talked about a survey that basically said that Europeans in the working class have given up on the safety net. But that's been a long situation. Reagan talked about welfare queens, and by, I suppose, default, kings perhaps too. Big bucks, buying steaks, all that sort of thing. Well, nothing's changed. That was back in the 80s, 30 years ago. More than 30 years ago. We're running the same old repeat record. So that has not changed. So when you see DJ Trump, that is some embedded ideology that's been there. The Republicans fought tooth and nail after the most racist election in the nation's history in 2008. A depression was going on. Barack Obama was elected. He even carried Indiana, in North Carolina. But the Republicans, the leader in the Senate, minority at that time in the Senate, said he was going to do all he could to sabotage Barack Obama, and he did. And when the Democrats lost the House, Barack Obama was in for the tough ride, literally. But he was still able to accomplish many things, bring the nation out of a full-blown depression to a recovery period, and we're still in that recovery period now. Now, the foreign policy had much to look to, and it was still based upon Wilsonian foreign policy, so he let the Hillary the Monster Clinton run the State Department primarily, and she ran him into the ground in Tripoli, Libya, murdering Colonel Gaddafi, and the place has been in turmoil and chaos ever since. And then came the Syrian conflict. That was something invented by the Americans, primarily another scheme like weapons of mass destruction. They claimed that President Assad dropped chemicals on his own people. It was an absolute lie. That was done by U.S.-backed gangsters. And the same thing appeared once more. So let me get back to Mr. Cook here. Showing, this is in Virginia. Davis showed voting patterns from 2013 to 2017. Gubernatorial patterns across a vast expanse of the Old Dominion state. That's Virginia. Shifts in a Republican favor from 2013 to 2007. Mostly in small towns in rural Virginia. The nominee there, Gillespie, a smart guy who ran a good campaign, made no major mistakes, actually outperformed past-winning Republican candidates in southern and southwest Virginia. Meanwhile, large blue blots created by the mass of blue areas in northern Virginia, Richmond, Hampton Roads, basic suburbs, and more urbanized areas are strongly in favor of the Democrats. They were small blue smedgerings in nearby Winchester, Harrisonburg, Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, where our friends at the University of Virginia. We honor the murder of Heaven Higher there, Lynchburg, and Martinsville. Challenge for the GOP is the population growth in the blue areas tend to be Democrats. Thus, Gillespie lost to Rep. Northam by an unexpected 9 points. Democrats carried Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General contest respectively by 5.4. and a 6.5. This means is that it is a mistake to simply say that the Republican Party is in a state of decline. Populism is shifting certain kinds of voters towards the Republican Party. It's not really shifting them towards the Republican Party. Those voters have already been in the Republican Party. They were called at one time Reagan Democrats, that came out of the conservative Democratic Party. Across the nation, we're seeing political division, some of the greatest sense of Reconstruction. He talks about the liking of President Trump to Andrew Jackson. Well, Andrew Jackson was working in a post-slavery setup, and he brought apartheid in. We're seeing semantic shifts, not just Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other, but not just conservatives on one side, liberals on another, but on a geographic level, people who live near the coast and in urban suburban areas on one side, and heartline small towns. But part of the problem small towns are having is, and this is back to California, many small towns lack dental services, they lack doctors, they lack internet services, a lot of things that they lack. And since they've decided to take a racist stand on the social safety net and been bamboozled, as Jesse Jackson would say, there are problems out there in the small towns, especially many of the small towns in the hollows of West Virginia, etc. They're not doing very well. And many of those places have larger amounts of senior citizens. And they have jobs that are low paying. There's some manufacturing there, but that is mixed. And this tariff regime will knock out many of those smaller manufacturers. So we have a mixed situation. Let me finish up Mr. Cook, and we'll do the sports. It isn't hard to find those who populated the Clinton-Carter administration wringing their hands over the possibility of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, wing of the party. Well, the party itself has taken measures to keep, say, Bernie out. Bernie has to swear on a stack of whatever that he is a Democrat and runs as a Democrat. He can't be an independent, runs as a Democrat. So, in other words, that in itself will cause a lot of problems for people. There's no doubt about that. And let me just go on here to ESPN, do the baseball scores, and we'll finish this report up. Incidentally, Justify won the Triple Crown, the first horse to win the Triple Crown. That was at Belmont since Seattle Slew. That was in the 70s, long time. Anyway, on to actual sports here. Horse racing. Don't hear much about that these days. But DJ's love of the NBA, interesting situation there. NBA has a lot of games, makes a lot of money, and the only one that didn't get in that thing was Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has been having problems since the cameras have appeared there. And what's happening is you have these commercial operations that are sponsoring the camera view. We were never in favor of the instant replay in football, definitely not in baseball. Nonetheless, the White Sox were in Fenway Park. 5-2 White Sox over the Red Sox. And the Orioles were in Toronto. Toronto won this one. I guess DJ Trump was rooting for the Orioles. They're down in Baltimore. 13-3. Cleveland was in the Motor City, and 9-2 Cleveland on top of the Tigers. The Cardinals were in Cincy. Cincy 6-3 over the Cards. The Padres were in Florida. They won the game 3-1. The Mariners were in Florida also, 5-4 there. Mariners have prevailed. It's a hot race with the Mariners out in Seattle. Used to go see them in the old Kingdom. Anyway, the Brewers and Phillies in Philadelphia. Phillies are 4-3 in that contest. The Phillies are starting to win a few games. They need to. The Astros and Twins in the, the Angels and the Twins in the Twin Cities. 7-5 the score there. The Twins over the Angels. Twins had 10 hits and no errors, and the Angels 8 hits and no errors. The Pirates and Cubs in Wrigley Field. It was all Pirates, 7-1. Poor Cubbies. The line score: Pirates 9 hits, 2 errors, and the Cubbies 4 hits and no errors. Oh well. Finally, the Astros and Rangers, Battle of Texas here. The Astros 8-7. The D-backs and Rockies in Denver. It was all Arizona 8-3. And the Royals and Athletics out in Oakland. It was Athletics 3-2. Giants and Nationals in D.C. Giants shut out the Nationals. Finally win a game. Atlanta and the Dodgers in Los Angeles. It was 7-2 to Dodgers. Dodgers 10 hits, no errors. And Atlanta 7 hits and no errors. Yankees and Mets, a game I tuned into. The Mets finally won a game. Shut out the Yankees 2-0. And so it goes. I tried to...
Mets looking to avoid the sweep, hosting the Yanks.
No, it's not. The American League East, well, I guess we do have the standings here. The Yankees are, they're playing, 6-89 ball. Next is Boston. They're 5.5, they're half game out, Toronto, anyway. They are 14 out. Tampa Bay is 14.5. And Baltimore, forget about it, they're 24.5 out. That's the East. In the National League. I'm not sure how this is set up here. Where I'm having so many problems all at once here. Anyway, we'll try this one more time. And see if we can actually get the standings in. And we finally got them. Yeah. Hooray, hooray. The American League Central, Cleveland is on top. And the Tigers are a half game back. The Twins are 5.5 games back. And the Sox are 12 games back. And the Royals are 13.5 games back. In the West, the Mariners are on top. And Houston Astros are all tied up together here. The Mariners had 41 wins and 24 losses. The Houston 42 wins and 25 losses. They're all playing 6:31, 6:27 ball. And the Angels, they are 4.5 games back there. And let's see, who else? Oakland is 7.5 games back. In the National League East, the Nationals are on top. Atlanta is right behind them. And the Phillies of Philadelphia, they're 3 games back. And the Mets are 7.5 games back. And the Marlins are 14 games back. In the National League Central, the Brewers are on top. The Cubbies are half game back. It's a tight race. The Cards are 3 games back. This is anyone's race. And the Pirates are 7 games back, and in the bottom is the Reds, 16.5 games back. In the West, the Diamondbacks are on top. You can believe that one. And let's see, who else? The Diamondbacks. And the Giants are 2.5 games back. The Dodgers are 2.5 games back. And the Rockies are 3.5 games back. They're all up in. The Padres are 5.5 games back. This win-loss thing here, the D-backs have won 35, lost 29. The Giants have won 30 and lost 32. The Dodgers have won 33 and lost 32. They're all at 508. So this does it for the standings. This will do it for us. They're incidentally building some temporary housing out in Hawaii. We'll have more on that later. This is the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 11th of June, 2018, WBRN Radio, and on the Boston Red Network. Have a good week, everyone. We will talk to you soon. Incidentally, on BR on the World, we will, and on this network, we will be covering the Singapore Summit between Mr. of Democratic Republic of Korea and DJ Trump of the United States presidency. Don't want to leave him out of it. He'll tweet nasty things about us.
Time magazine, getting tongue-tied this morning. Selena Zito is with us. She's from the Washington Examiner, also a columnist at the New York Post. Evan Osnos writes for the New Yorker. He has reported extensively on North Korea and has a piece out this week on the historical context of the current diplomatic effort. And Sungmin Kim covers the White House from Capitol Hill for the Washington Post. Welcome to all of you. Evan, you have spent some time in North Korea reporting on what you've seen on the ground. This is diplomacy on steroids, on a fast track. Do you have any sense of what is happening inside North Korea when it comes to their own expectations?
Well, I think that, the big question for all of us is how did we go from talking about nuclear war a few months ago to sitting at the negotiating table today? And the answer is that actually, beneath the pyrotechnics, there has been this big dynamic going on, which is that North Korea has been trying, not only over the last several months, but over the last few years, to try to figure out a way how to engage the outside world. They're sort of trying to do what China did in the late 1970s. And we have to, they don't want to be compared to China. But remember, China was a communist country, it still is, that said we have to open up economic control, maintain political control. And part of sitting down with Donald Trump is to say, how do we hold on to our dictatorship in Pyongyang while also beginning to engage the outside world economically?
Little by little, without threatening their control, I think is key there. Sung, when you look at these talks, you heard Senator Markey on this program just say a few moments ago, he doesn't feel like Congress is clued in, being briefed, and that key information is being shared. Are you hearing similar gripes?
I think the way that the diplomacy is being engaged is kind of leaving almost everybody in the dark right now. But I think what's going to be critical to see in the summit and in subsequent meetings going on to see whether if the president does submit something to Congress for approval. And as we've talked about before, that was a major concern from Republicans during the Obama administration that he didn't get official congressional sign-off for the Iran deal. So I think it'd be interesting to see. Senators have said that the administration has already made those commitments to submit any sort of agreement to Capitol Hill, but obviously that would only begin a massive fight in Congress over whether to approve that nuclear deal.
It was interesting to hear that Senator Lindsey Graham has an authorization to use military force ready to go, suggesting he thinks the president would have to ask permission, essentially, before taking military strikes. And
it was also interesting with Senator Markey just earlier, refusing to even entertain the prospect of an AUMF because he says there's no military option on the Korean Peninsula. A lot of members of Congress feel that way as well. And that's why both Democrats and Republicans, have been so eager to see these diplomatic efforts succeed.
Selena, you have your ear often to the ground when it comes to how the Trump supporters and Trump base receive some of this information. This is a high-risk gamble for the president. What is the perception here? Does he walk away with a win just by walking into that room with Kim Jong-un?
Pretty much. That's what he does best, is high-risk gambles, and he does things that are a little bit unorthodox and not as traditional as you would see other presidents. I have found, not just with people that supported Trump, but people that either stayed at home or supported Clinton, have been able to step back on this issue and understand that we're in the middle of something very historic. It's sort of, if you're older, it's sort of like Nixon in China. Or if you're a little less older, it's sort of like Reagan in Geneva with Gorbachev. So I think people understand there's a moment here that we might all be able to benefit from. And so I think they're enjoying, or they're at least sitting back and watching this with maybe hope and skepticism.
Molly, you, on a different topic, have a cover story in Time. You write about the Mueller investigation, something that the president doesn't really want as much press about, but is certainly angered by and tweeting about himself. This is a major diversion from that, of course, right now. But you did see a development in the case with more indictments against the former Trump campaign chair, Paul Manafort, this week. How significant?
Well, Mueller is playing hardball, as he sort of has been all along. But there has been a notion that he is ratcheting up the pressure on Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, who was out on bail pending a trial, who has, unlike several former Trump associates who have pleaded guilty so far, Manafort has continued to fight the charges very hard, and he's now accused of tampering with potential witnesses. And Mueller is seeking to throw him in jail pending his trial, and also bringing charges based on that alleged witness tampering. So we see, increasing pressure on Manafort, potentially trying to get Manafort to cooperate, to turn on President Trump and offer evidence having to do with the substance of the investigation. Remember, the charges against Manafort have to do with things that he did long before he ever joined the Trump campaign. It's money laundering and other charges from his career as a lobbyist. So that's not what the Mueller investigation is supposed to be about. His mandate is to investigate Russian meddling, and this is one of the criticisms from the president and other critics of the investigation, is he has wandered quite far afield of that supposed mandate. So the idea is that Mueller may be putting pressure on Manafort and others in order to try to get at the potential collusion that he is investigating in 2016.
Selena, while this may be far afield of the mandate, these are significant, and this is actual legal momentum here. Right. These are individuals being charged, companies being charged as well here. So can the president still get away with calling it a witch hunt?
He probably will, whether it's true or not. That's the mantra that he has adopted, and I don't think he's going to stray from it. And to Molly's point, the president is unhappy with how far out this scope has come. And he believes that to him, this is proof that this is not about him, and that the charges against him are unfair. And this is proof in the pudding. And I think that's where the president's head is right now on this issue.
So, are we going to see anything from Congress on the immigration front before these congressional races in November, or is this just an internal fight with no progress?
Count me as a skeptic of any sort of immigration action on Capitol Hill. I think the big day to watch is Tuesday, because that's been kind of the imposed deadline for this discharge petition, which is a complicated procedural maneuver to trigger these immigration votes in the House. Tuesday is a tentative deadline that these House moderates have set on whether these quiet negotiations with conservatives would actually succeed, or if they're just going to go ahead and force votes over the desires of their leadership. But Republicans have constantly struggled on immigration issues for years and years. And there is a reason why when immigration legislation that involves any sort of pathway for citizenship, whether it's for Dreamers or for a broader population, it's passed under Democratic control. It was a Democratic-led Senate in 2013 and a lame duck Democratic House in 2010 that passed the DREAM Act. So if there is a way to coalesce both the moderates who want these legal solution for the Dreamers and the conservatives who do also want a legal solution as well, but they've talked about the need for more security measures. If there's a way to coalesce 218 Republican votes on that, we'll see by Tuesday. But again, count me as a skeptic.
Evan, you heard Larry Kudlow on this program, the economic advisor to the president, saying that the blow-up with the Canadian prime minister really had more to do with the North Korean leader and making him look weak, making the president look weak ahead of those talks.
Yeah.
You don't normally hear those two countries in the same sentence, but is there something to what the White House is arguing here, that so much of the U.S. weight has to do with perception?
Well, look, the president decided that this was a grave insult that he couldn't abide from Canada. The reality is our allies and our adversaries, things are being thrown upside down right now. The president walked into what should have been the friendliest club he will ever be in, and he managed to leave that in tatters. And that is a problem that doesn't just pose a challenge for the president tomorrow. This is a long-range issue that he has to confront. How do we keep Americans safe over the long term? The way you do that traditionally is by keeping your allies close and working through problems in ways that make sense. This is not how we've done it in the past, and I don't think it puts us in a particularly strong moment as we go into Singapore.
Syngman, do you think that, it's been interesting to see some Republicans speak out on the trade front with this dispute at the G7, but they're sort of few and far between. there hasn't been outcry.
And I think we saw a moment earlier this week when we did see Republicans starting to coalesce around legislation that would limit the president's power on tariffs. We had that legislation from Senator Bob Corker, who isn't always a Trump ally, but you do have senators such as Pat Toomey, Mike Lee, Jeff Flake behind that legislation as well with a bunch of Democrats. But the president gathered about a dozen Senate Republicans at the White House on Wednesday, mostly friendly Senate Republicans, and he made the message clear that I don't like this bill. I think it infringes on my power to negotiate on trade issues. And Republican leadership tell us that this bill, you can get a vote if you want, but if it doesn't have a presidential signature, it's all just kind of an exercise.
Interesting to see how this develops. Thanks to all of you.
There, and you fly out of there, and the host, Canadian Prime Minister, starts taking whacks at you, pot shots at you, on the eve of this Korean summit. President Trump had no alternative, in my opinion, but to express his opinion that he's going to pull out. To pull out of the communique.
But
that's
when
what
it
he
comes
said.
to NAFTA, which you said there was progress on, you've said publicly the president is not going to pull out of NAFTA.
That's correct.
But then the president said he may broker a side bilateral agreement with Canada and Mexico.
That's correct.
How do you do both things at once? How is that not withdrawing from NAFTA?
Oh, no. We won't withdraw from NAFTA. We are heavy into negotiations. And the negotiation will either be bilateral or they'll be trilateral.
So
okay,
despite
one
this
way or the
blow
other.
Up, you still think you can get a trade deal with Canada?
Well, I don't know that, Margaret. I mean, I want to say I don't know. Because I think, again, Trudeau's very unfortunate statements, his betrayal. He betrayed Trump. Can I ask? He betrayed the whole G7 by attacking right after that.
But how he said before, which was that the tariffs were insulting and that they'd follow through with the July 1st tariffs.
You want to say that right after a successful G7 meeting? Is that necessary? Seriously? Where's the good faith? Where's the optimism? People came together at that meeting. I'm in there working with the heads of state. It was my great pleasure representing the president. The president was there. We're putting words on paper. We're making adjustments. We're making compromises. And we're coming out with a document that we can accept. Most people thought that wouldn't happen. So that happens. And instead of being a good push to the Singapore-North Korean talks, Trudeau decides to come out and play to domestic political consumption and take potshots at the American president who is representing the rest of the world. That's just not fair play.
Why the president called for Russia to rejoin the G8? Was that just meant as a provocation?
No, I mean, they were in the G8. It was the G8 for many years.
Right.
And
then they were kicked out after invading part of Ukraine and annexing Crimea.
So be it. Perhaps, as by the way, many foreign policy scholars agree with Trump on this. Not all, but many. We have to do business with Russia.
Sure, but why after G7?
We used to, because it was that meeting that Russia used to be invited to. It was the G8 for many years.
But the head of U.S. intelligence says that Vladimir Putin is trying to undermine the rule of law, Western ideals, and democratic norms. So why invite him back to the very type of alliance he's trying to blow up?
I think Dan Coates was correct in his accusations, but that doesn't mean you can't do business with them, okay? I think, they're part of the world story. They are a power. They're a military power. They're not an economic power. And can I just switch back, Margaret? Look. President Trump spent 2 days, this is something dear to my heart, talking to these ministers, these heads of state, about free trade, ending tariffs, ending tariff barriers, ending subsidies, stopping trade wars, moving towards fairness and unfair trading practices. We're the fastest growing economy in the G7, and he's got a vision here. He's probably going to be the best trade reformer in several decades in the world scene. Why wouldn't he want to do? Why would anyone want to undercut him?
I want to have you come back and explain how all of this is going to add up to the kind of economic growth you're projecting. But we got to leave it here for this moment.